I want to start with the number that defined my life for about 18 months. 0. Not close to 0. Not almost 0. Not the kind of 0 that has a few thousand behind it that you're not counting because they're in a retirement account you can't touch yet. Actual 0. The kind of 0 that means when the layoff notice landed on my desk on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and I drove home in traffic and sat in the parking lot of my apartment complex and tried to do the math on what happened next. The math came back with nothing. No savings. No 401k worth mentioning. I had cashed it out twice during hard stretches, and what was left was $11,000 that would last 4 months if I spent nothing. No pension, no husband, no family money waiting somewhere. Just a 61-year-old woman in a car in a parking lot in Phoenix, Arizona, with a severance check that covered 6 weeks and a resume that the market was about to teach her a great deal about. I need to tell you how I got to 0 before I tell you how I got out of it, because I think the how matters, and because I think there are people watching this who have their own version of 0 and who need to hear that it is not the end. My name is Deborah. I am 64 years old. I live in Cebu City in the Philippines. My monthly income is $1,650. My monthly expenses are $580. And I am going to tell you exactly how a woman with nothing saved got from a parking lot in Phoenix to a life that is, and I want to be precise about this word, genuinely, specifically, measurably good. Let me tell you about the 0, because it has a history, and I think the history is important. I spent 30 years working in hotel management. Not the glamorous end of hotel management, not the corporate suites and the international assignments and the expense accounts. The operational end. Front desk supervisor, then front desk manager, then operations manager at a mid-range hotel chain that expanded aggressively in the early 2000s and contracted aggressively in 2009 and again in 2020. And that let people go both times with the specific efficiency of a company that has made the financial calculation about human cost and arrived at an answer it can live with. I was let go in 2009, the first time. I found another job within 4 months, which I considered a victory and which cost me the 401k I had spent 8 years building because the 4 months between jobs required it. I was let go again in 2020. The second time, pandemic-related, which at least meant everyone understood and nobody had to pretend it was performance. I rebuilt again. I found a position at a smaller property in Phoenix. I worked hard. I did not rebuild the savings, because rebuilding savings on a hotel operations manager salary in Phoenix in 2021 and 2022 required a margin I did not have. And then October 2023. The chain sold the property, new ownership, new management, new vision, and a list of existing staff they intended to retain that did not include my name. I sat in that parking lot for 45 minutes. I did the math 6 times and got the same answer 6 times. 6 weeks of severance, $11,000 in the 401k, which I could touch now without penalty because I was over 59 and a half, but which would be gone in 4 months. Social Security available at 62 if I claimed early, which would mean a permanently reduced payment for the rest of my life. Rent of $1,180 a month, a car payment of $340, a phone, utilities, groceries, a body that had been working 60-hour weeks in hotel operations for 3 decades and that had, in the parking lot accounting, no particular asset value. I went inside. I made dinner. I did not sleep. The next morning I started job hunting, because that was what you did, and I did not yet know that there was anything else to do. I want to tell you what job hunting at 61 in hotel management looks like, because I think some of you know and some of you need to understand. It looks like applications that go into systems and do not come back out. It looks like phone screens with HR people who are 26 years old and who are very pleasant and who ask you to walk them through your experience and then say they'll be in touch. It looks like 3 months passing and then 4 and then 5, and the 11,000 becoming 7,000, and then 4,000, and then a number that no longer provided meaningful cushion. I did everything correctly. I updated my resume. I hired a resume consultant with money I did not have. I networked. I applied to positions below my experience level and was told I was overqualified, and applied to positions at my experience level and heard nothing. I interviewed 4 times in 6 months. I received 1 offer for a position that paid $18 an hour for 30 hours a week with no benefits, which after taxes would not have covered my rent. By month 7, I was drawing down the 401k. By month 9, I had $800 left in savings and a specific, concrete understanding that I had a problem that the job market was not going to solve on the timeline the problem required. I want to be honest about those months because I think there is a version of this story that goes directly from the layoff to the Philippines and skips over the 9 months of genuine fear in between. And I think skipping that part is a disservice to anyone in a similar situation. Those months were frightening in a sustained, daily, first thing in the morning way that I did not expect and that I am not ashamed to tell you about. I was 61 years old and I was running out of money, and the system that was supposed to have an answer for that, the job market, the safety net, the sequence of sensible steps that a responsible adult was supposed to take, was producing nothing. I did not feel like a failure. I want to say that clearly. I had worked for 30 years. I had paid into Social Security for 30 years. I had been laid off twice by companies making financial decisions that had nothing to do with my performance. I was not a failure. I was a woman in a system that was not designed for women like me to land softly. What I felt was something more specific than failure. I felt like the options were closing. One by one, week by week, I could feel the aperture narrowing, and I did not know what was on the other side of it. I found the Philippines at month 7, not through a plan, through a conversation. I had a friend named Sandra who had retired to Dumaguete 2 years earlier, who I had been loosely following on social media without paying serious attention, who called me in May for a catch-up. I told her what was happening. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Deborah, have you looked at the numbers here?" I said I hadn't. I said the Philippines hadn't occurred to me. She said, "It should occur to you." And then she spent 45 minutes on the phone walking me through her monthly expenses, line by line, with the specificity of someone who had been keeping careful records and who understood that specificity was the difference between information that changed your situation and information that didn't. I got off the phone and made a spreadsheet. It is what I do. 30 years in hotel operations teaches you that the answer to every problem lives in a spreadsheet if you put the right numbers in. The right numbers were these. My Social Security, if I claimed at 62, would be $1,340 a month. Reduced from what it would have been at 67, yes, but available now, and now was the relevant timeline. If I added the small amount I could earn remotely, I had hotel operations experience, I could do consulting work, I had already been approached once about part-time remote work for a property management software company. My income could reach $1,650 a month. In Phoenix, $1,650 a month was a number that explained my problem. It did not cover my rent. It did not cover my car payment. It did not produce a life. In Cebu City, according to Sandra's numbers and the research I spent the next 3 months doing with the thoroughness of a woman whose survival depended on getting it right, $1,650 a month was a number that not only covered a life, but left money at the end of every month. I researched for 3 months. I read everything, every forum, every honest account, every complaint, every number I could find from real people living real lives, not from websites trying to sell me a dream. I asked Sandra questions until she was probably tired of answering them, and she answered all of them anyway because she understood what was at stake and is a good friend. I claimed Social Security at 62 on a Thursday morning, which is a decision that has a permanent cost, a reduced payment for the rest of my life, and that was nevertheless the correct decision given the specific constraints of my specific situation. I am telling you that directly because I think some of you are in situations where the correct decision has a cost and you need permission to make it anyway. You have my permission. Make the decision the situation requires, not the decision the situation would require if it were easier. I sold my car in August. The car payment alone was $340 a month, and I had been told repeatedly that you do not need a car in Cebu the way you need one in Phoenix. This turned out to be true. I sold what furniture had value. I ended my lease. I packed 2 suitcases. I flew to Cebu in September with $3,200 in savings, all that remained, and a plan that depended on the numbers working the way the spreadsheet said they would work. I did not know with certainty that they would. I knew that staying in Phoenix was a certainty in the wrong direction, and that Cebu was an uncertainty that might go either way. Between a bad certainty and an uncertain possibility, I chose the uncertainty. I have not regretted that choice for a single day. I want to tell you what arriving in Cebu was like, honestly and without the gloss that these stories sometimes acquire in the retelling. It was overwhelming. That is the accurate word. Not frightening, not exactly. I had been genuinely frightened in Phoenix, and this was a different quality of sensation, more like the feeling of having moved from a situation where the walls were closing to a situation where everything was suddenly very open and very unfamiliar and required navigation I hadn't fully prepared for. Cebu City is not Dumaguete. I want to be clear about that because I know many videos about the Philippines focus on Dumaguete, which is smaller and quieter and in some ways an easier entry point. Cebu City is a real city, the second largest in the Philippines, with traffic and density and noise and the particular vitality of a place where a lot of people are doing a lot of things at the same time. I had chosen it specifically because Sandra's contact there, a woman named Grace, who ran a small guest house in a neighborhood called Lahug, had an available apartment in the building next door that was in my budget and in a location with good transport connections and proximity to a hospital, which I had made a specific requirement of wherever I landed. Grace met me at the airport. She was 58, had been running her guest house for 11 years, spoke English with the clarity and precision of someone who had been speaking it professionally for decades, and had the particular quality of a woman who had seen many new arrivals and knew exactly which kind of help they needed without being asked. She helped me get my bags into a tricycle. She sat with me in the apartment while I looked at it. Small, clean, tiled, ceiling fan, air conditioning unit in the bedroom, a window that looked onto a small interior courtyard where a tree I couldn't identify was growing through a gap in the concrete, and she answered every question I had and several I hadn't thought to ask yet. I signed the lease that afternoon. 6 months, with an option to extend. 12,000 pesos a month. At the exchange rate at the time, $213. I sat in that apartment that first evening with my 2 suitcases still unpacked, and I thought, the arithmetic works. I don't know what else works yet, but the arithmetic works. And for a woman who had spent 9 months in Phoenix watching the arithmetic fail in every direction, the arithmetic working was enough to start with. Let me give you the real numbers now, because this is the script where the numbers are the story, and I want to give them to you with the precision they deserve. My apartment in Lahug, Cebu City, 1 bedroom, tiled throughout, ceiling fan, air conditioning in the bedroom that I use at night, and sometimes in the late afternoon when the heat is at its most serious. A small kitchen where I cook most mornings and some evenings. A bathroom with a hot and cold shower, which I mention because it is not universal here, and I had made it a requirement. A short walk to a jeepney stop that takes me wherever I need to go for 15 pesos. Rent, 13,000 pesos, $230 at current rates. My rent in Phoenix was $1,180. I want to sit in that comparison for a moment because I think it is the number that contains the entire story of how this was possible. Electricity, $55 a month. I run the air conditioning at night, ceiling fans during the day, and I have made my peace with the heat in a way that took about 3 months and that I now consider one of the more useful adaptations of my life. Water, $8. Internet, $35. I pay for a good fiber connection because I need reliable internet for my remote consulting work, and I consider it a non-negotiable. Phone, $12 on a local SIM. A woman named Nora comes 4 times a week. She is 53 years old, has a daughter in nursing school whose progress she updates me on with the regularity and detail of a progress report, and she has completely reorganized my kitchen and my storage situation twice, both times without asking and both times correctly. She costs $58 a month. I have attempted to tip her on holidays, and she accepts the tip with grace and without reducing the regularity with which she reorganizes things I have recently organized, which I have decided to interpret as a form of affection. Food. I shop at the Carbon Market, Cebu's main public market, twice a week. It is an experience that I could spend an entire video describing, and that I will summarize by saying it is loud and fragrant and alive, and contains the freshest fish I have encountered anywhere, and vegetables that cost almost nothing, and fruit that is so good it has permanently ruined my relationship with the fruit I used to buy at the Kroger in Phoenix. A week of market shopping costs me approximately $18. I eat out 4 or 5 evenings a week at small local places where a full meal, rice, a main dish, vegetables, a cold drink, costs between $1.50 and $2.50. Medications. I take a blood pressure medication and an antidepressant that I have been on for 6 years and that I want to mention specifically because I know some people worry about psychiatric medications abroad. Both are available here at the pharmacy 4 blocks from my apartment for a combined cost of $29 a month. In Phoenix, the same medications with insurance cost me $112. My doctor here, Dr. Villanueva, a woman who trained at the University of Santo Tomas in Manila and who has been practicing in Cebu for 20 years, manages both prescriptions with the same care and with considerably more time than any American physician I have had in the last decade. Remote consulting work. I do approximately 15 hours a week of operational consulting for 2 hotel properties in the United States, both of whom I connected with through a former colleague. I review operational reports, provide recommendations, participate in weekly calls. This work pays me $310 a month, which I did not include in my original calculation, and which has been transformative in a way that has nothing to do with the money. It gives me Tuesday and Thursday mornings as defined, purposeful time. It gives me the specific satisfaction of being useful in the way that uses the skills I spent 30 years building. It gives me the identity of a working person alongside the freedom of a person who is not working 60-hour weeks. That combination is, I have discovered, precisely what I needed. Total monthly expenses, $582. Monthly income, $1,650. Monthly surplus, $1,068. I have been here 2 years. I have added just over $25,000 to my savings, rebuilt from almost nothing, from the $3,200 I arrived with, to a number that represents real security for the first time in my adult life, on $1,650 a month, after being laid off at 61 with nothing saved. I want to be honest that the math is not magic. It is geography. The same income that was failing in Phoenix is succeeding in Cebu, because the cost of a life in Cebu is a fraction of the cost of a life in Phoenix, and that fraction is the entire difference between a woman drowning and a woman building. Let me tell you what the days look like, because the days are what I came here for and what the money makes possible. 6 in the morning. The city is already doing things. Cebu City does not have a gentle awakening. It starts early and it starts fully. I make coffee on the small stove, the locally grown Bengay blend that Nora buys for me at the market, and that has made me a coffee snob in a way I was not previously. And I take it to the window that looks onto the courtyard. I sit. I do not manage anything. I watch the tree in the courtyard do what trees do in the morning, which is not much, but which I have found, over 2 years, to be exactly the right amount. My consulting calls are Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I dress for them in a way I don't dress for other mornings, because discipline around professional context matters even when you're sitting in Cebu rather than Phoenix. And because I have found that the act of dressing for work is part of how I make the work feel real. The calls are good. The people I work with are professional and respectful, and the problems they bring me are problems I know how to solve, which is a sensation I had underestimated the value of until it was temporarily unavailable. The market on Wednesday and Saturday mornings. I go early. Carbon Market at 7 in the morning is the city at its most honest. The fish vendors who arrived before the sun, with whatever came off the boats, the vegetable women whose tables are a feat of organization and abundance, the fruit section where I have a woman named Conching who knows I will buy the ripe mangoes and sets the best ones aside and pretends this is normal inventory management. I have a bag I bring. I have a route I take. I have people whose names I know and who know mine. In Phoenix, I went to the grocery store and spoke to no one. Here I go to the market and am spoken to by several people before I have made a single purchase. Afternoons I have reclaimed in a way I did not know was possible. I read. Real books, long ones, the kind I told myself for 30 years I would read when I had time and then did not have time. I have read more in 2 years here than in the previous decade. I walk in the late afternoon when the heat has begun to relent, through the neighborhood streets where I have become, over time, a recognizable presence. The American woman who walks every afternoon and says good afternoon to people on their steps, and who has learned enough Cebuano to be understood, and not enough to be embarrassing. The evenings I spend on the boulevard when I have the energy for the jeepney, at a small restaurant near my apartment when I don't. I have a usual order at the place I go most often. It arrives without my asking. That still surprises me, that this is simply what happens when you show up consistently enough. You become known. The place makes room for you. Your usual is ready. I want to address what is hard, because the hardest parts of this life are real and you deserve them plainly. My daughter Keisha is in Atlanta. She is 38 years old, and she has 2 children I am watching grow on a phone screen, which is its own specific kind of ache that I will not minimize. I was in Atlanta when her younger son took his first steps, and I watched it on a video she sent, and I cried in the courtyard by myself, and then I went inside and made dinner, and was grateful for the video, and for the ability to be grateful for the video rather than consumed by what it was not. That is the ongoing negotiation of this life, and I navigate it week by week. The heat in the summer months is a physical experience that requires a restructuring of how you move through time. I adapted over 3 months, and the adaptation was real and worth making, but I will not pretend the 3 months were comfortable. The visa situation requires management and patience, and a local agent I found through Grace, and who handles everything for a fee that is modest and worth every peso. I renew. I do not think about it beyond ensuring the renewal is handled. The uncertainty of the remote work is real. My 2 hotel clients are good relationships and stable as these things go, which is to say stable until they're not. I keep my consulting network active. I keep my skills current. I am a hotel operations professional with 30 years of experience, and that has value in a market that is not bounded by geography the way it once was. And there are moments, not many, but real, when I think about the version of this life that was supposed to exist. The one where I worked until 65 and retired with savings, and did not get laid off in October, and did not spend 9 months watching the money count down. I think about that version with something between grief and acceptance, which is the complicated feeling you have about a life that was reasonable to expect and that did not arrive. And then I look at the life that did arrive. The market on Wednesday morning. Conching setting aside the mangoes. Nora reorganizing my shelves. Dr. Villanueva with 40 minutes and her full attention. The tree in the courtyard. Keisha's son on the phone showing me a drawing he made. The $25,000 in savings that did not exist 2 years ago. The life that arrived is better than the life I was losing in Phoenix. It is not the life